Hello and welcome to another fantastic session. I'm particularly excited. I think this is probably one of the highlights of this 3-day summit. And I'm actually very excited to be here together with these 5 panelists and the people that I consider some of the more inspiring people in the planet, but as well people that have been doing things that I think probably can highlight all the different directions of humanity as we speak. So we are talking about a panel that reflects artificial intelligence, robotics, singularity, and deep tech, the next frontier. And definitely this is the next frontier. And all the projects that everyone here is doing are as well touching the frontier of humanity and as well the most different things of what makes us humans. So I will try to be synthetic. My name is Dinis Guarda. I'm the founder of the Open Business Council Summit and this initiative with Cities ABC and World Smart Cities Forum. This is the second day of the summit. It's our second initiative. I'm very proud that we've been achieving over 50,000 people in the last 1 day and a half. And we have people from all over the planet joining us as we speak. So I will start with small introductions to everyone because definitely I think the profiles of everyone here speak for themselves. And we have definitely leading personalities, but as well people that have been changing everything we do in technology in different areas. So I'll start by, without any particular forward in different areas. So I'll start with Scott Edward Parazynski, that is an American physician and a former NASA astronaut, that is as well an entrepreneur and someone that has been reflecting in social impact in different areas. And it was a couple of times on space. And of course, it doesn't need a lot of introduction for all the work he's been doing, but as well all the impact he's been having, both in different areas of technology and as well humanity in general. Then we have Ben Goertzel, that is someone that I respect a lot and as well have been having fantastic talks. That is, of course, his CV goes for a lot of areas, but one of the leading global artificial intelligence, both thinkers, but as well entrepreneurs and as well creators that has been creating a lot of different areas when it comes to technology, when it comes to artificial intelligence, both on the areas of frameworks, but as well in terms of creating open AI and of course in Singularity Net, and as well work he's been doing with Sophia the robot and a lot of other projects that he's doing. Actually at the moment they created as well the DAO for Sophia, and he's been working a lot of projects in terms of open artificial intelligence in general. And then we have Aidan Meller, that is a personality that touches a lot of different areas from the arts to technology. And he created Aidan the robot, probably the most powerful creation of him, but is as well a very considerate merchant of arts that has been working with some of the top artists in the world or in history, from Picasso's to a lot of different other organizations. But with Aidan robot has been pushing the boundaries of what makes our next iteration of creating art and technology. And in this case, Aidan has been quoted in all the different media in the world, from Times to BBC, as one of the leading cutting-edge projects in terms of AI, robotics, and as well as an android that actually creates art and is actually pushing the boundaries of art. And last but not least, John Sweet, that is someone that is creating as well and being part of creating the first mainstream canine robot. That is as well one of the most advanced blockchain AI robots that is considering and making a lot of bridges in terms of how to interact somehow robots, assistant robots, a lot of different things, which is going to be quite important for the next decades of humanity. And of course, we finish with Olivia Gambelin, that is probably, I would say, the conscious of the group. And she's been reflecting, writing, and as well researching in terms of the boundaries of artificial intelligence and how artificial intelligence and ethics can actually be used for both organizations. She's been advising the likes of Google and other big corporations, but as well working with the World Economic Forum and a lot of other things, and leading universities, pushing the boundaries as well, how we can actually create frameworks that actually can avoid creating any kind of the risk that we see in science fiction or in fiction, but as well looking at concrete day-to-day systems. So I'll start straight away because we don't have a huge time, although we're going to be trying to use as much as possible. So I'll pass the word to Scott Parazynski, that I'm particularly excited to hear. Thank you for being here. That will talk about what he's doing in these areas and as well some of his present positions.
Thank you, Denis. And I have to say, it's a great honor to be with such a distinguished panel and to share this this event with you. Let me pull up a slide here. Let me get the proper deck going. And hopefully you're able to see and present my slide deck at this point, talking to the back room. There we go. I'll go to full screen here. Doesn't seem to be, there we go. Is that working for you?
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. Well, as I was saying, it's a pleasure to be with you here today. And I have to say, it's an exciting time to be alive. I've been very fortunate to live my life as an explorer, and I've used extreme environments as a catalyst for my innovation. So I'm an inventor, product developer, and entrepreneur. And so I've touched on a number of these areas throughout my career, and just wanted to give you a quick snapshot of some of the things that I've been involved in and essentially how I got to be here. We find ourselves in essentially a new second generation space age, but I grew up in the first one. I grew up looking up towards Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin and wanted to become the very first to set boot prints down on Mars. And in fact, this poster rendition of someone rappelling down into the Valles Marineris, that's who I wanted to be. It unfortunately didn't quite happen out that way for my personal career, but I did have the opportunity to fly in space on 5 wonderful occasions, a wide array of very complex missions, a number of spacewalks, extraordinary science that we were able to accomplish on my missions. And I've also been able to visit some other extraordinary places on and above and below the surface of our planet, deep beneath our oceans, inside an active volcano, a Masaya volcano in Nicaragua, to the South Pole, and even to the top of Mount Everest. And all these places have been extraordinary opportunities to support life, to extract more science, thinking in different ways, to do that safely and more efficiently. And ultimately, when we create technology to expand our capacities in extreme environments, they come back and they help us in the intensive care unit, the operating room, helping firefighters and every industry that you can imagine. So it's important that we continue to press the boundaries of human opportunity. And of course, the tools that we're here to talk about today really kind of accelerate that. So my own personal mantra in space as a physician by primary training is that all of us fortunate enough to be in healthcare have both an opportunity and an obligation to innovate. And I extend that to all of us who happen to be here in this global room. I think we have guests from all over the world participating in this wonderful conference. But all of us that are, kind of leaning forward, we have to always ask ourselves, what are the ways in which we can do things better, make things more cost effective? In medicine, we think about how can we improve outcomes, reduce pain and suffering, things of that nature. But always asking, how can we make things better? Because if we're not asking those questions, history will certainly repeat itself. And so when we think about the climate, our environment, healthcare, space, energy, communications, and just generally improving the quality of life, the tools that we're here to talk about have extraordinary capacity. So my day-to-day job is as CEO and founder of a company called Fluidity Technologies, and it actually hearkened from the very early space program back in the Mercury program. When we first sent astronauts into space, there was concern that if the capsule were to lose pressurization, their spacesuit would inflate like a big balloon, and they wouldn't be able to use their feet on the rudder pedals to adjust the yaw or the pointing of the spacecraft. And so they invented a simple mechanical device called a rotational hand controller. Your kids probably have one at home, a Logitech control joystick on a base. So we've had these things around for quite a while, but my intellectual property has taken that several degrees further. We have now the ability in a single hand to control with tactile feedback and many other features up to 6 or 7 degrees of freedom, and almost making movement through three-dimensional space a subconscious act. So that when we're flying a drone, when we're flying one of these flying cars or urban aerial mobility vehicles, as are becoming very popular now in development, it's almost an intuitive act. You're focusing on what you're out there to do rather than the mechanics of pitch, yaw, roll, and thrust. So these same sorts of tools will allow us, by powering it through machine learning and ultimately deep learning, to actually be better than the hands of a very skilled pilot or the hands of a skilled surgeon. Steering a catheter through the human body with intuitive ease and having much better outcomes, to be able to potentially even teleoperate some of these assets around the world. And I'll talk about that in a moment. But I think you'd have to be living under a rock to not appreciate all the wonderful things that are happening in space right now. Just yesterday, there was a sort of a Kitty Hawk moment when we flew the very first rotorcraft on another planet. The Ingenuity drone, if you will, flew on Mars for a brief flight, and there will be others that will follow. Additionally, there are other opportunities, not just for governmental astronauts to fly on large programs, but even scientists, engineers, and tourists to fly in suborbital space on Virgin Galactic, to fly orbital flight on SpaceX or Blue Origin. There'll be independent space stations in the future. It really is a time of great promise, and people are thinking really audaciously. And in particular, Elon Musk has this long-range vision to not only send explorers to Mars, but send colonists. And he's so dedicated to this vision that he's stated that he'd like to die on Mars. And I think that's certainly commitment to your lifelong vision. But the rocket ship on the left here has 42 engines on the tail of it, and with a capacity ultimately to take 100 people at a time to slowly colonize Mars, which is really quite extraordinary. To live in a time when a private citizen, granted a multi-billionaire, can have this vision, and we take him quite seriously because he's already delivering not only payload but astronauts to the International Space Station. Soon he'll be taking, I believe, crews to the moon and ultimately to Mars. So this rocket here on the left that's known as BFR, which I think stands for Big Fun Rocket, or maybe it's something else, I'm not exactly sure. Another thing that I've been involved with is terrestrial exploration, and this is a very interesting expedition that I took part in about 4 or 5 years ago to Masaya volcano in Nicaragua. And it's the youngest lava lake in the world. And we set the very first boot prints adjacent to this lava lake. And not just for the adventure of it, it was certainly an extraordinary life experience, but the goal was to implant a sensor network around the lava lake, as well as up at the crater rim, and collect an enormous data set to which we could then apply machine learning and deep learning tools to develop models of eruptive activity. There are over 800 million people around the world that live in close proximity to volcanoes. And so imagine the ability to have this predictive capability, to have an early warning system for the entire planet. If we could listen to our planet, we could have better tools for tsunamis and earthquakes and other natural disasters like this. So the same sorts of approaches can and are being used, of course, to look inward, to look at the human body. And so I've also had a great opportunity to use telemedicine, not only up in space, but at one point in my career, I was the chief medical officer for the U.S. Antarctic program, where we screened about 3,000 people who went to Antarctica every year. And then we would support them through telemedicine assets half a world away. This is my facility in Galveston in the lower right, Galveston, Texas, in the United States. And so imagine as we advance our technologies, not only in the communications, but in the ability to teleoperate and to use AI and signature recognition to auto-sequence, if you will, certain types of medical procedures. It's going to be really extraordinary. And I think the drivers, again, as we proceed outward, beyond the moon and ultimately to Mars, there's not really capacity to have real-time interaction with a robotic asset. So we can have consultants here on Earth, but if it takes 21 minutes for a one-way transmission and then another 21 minutes to come back, that's really not a real-time solution. So we need to have the ability for just-in-time training, and then also tools that are powered by AI and robotic systems that can work semi-autonomously. So where do I stand in all of this? I think that the potential for automation, for increased reliance upon robotics, increasing power of our AI is extraordinary, but I believe that there's always going to be a need for a human in the loop. And actually, I'll restate that, a human on the loop. I think we can do more with our robotic systems and AI-enabled systems, but there's always a need when things go off script, those unanticipated dynamic situations where you just need to take over control, either out of choice or out of necessity in an emergency. And so I think there's a great opportunity for innovators like myself and those on this panel, perhaps, who will be thinking about how can we best leverage these tools with advanced human-machine interfaces. So with that, I think that concludes my remarks, and pass the baton over to the next speaker. Thank you. Not hearing you, Dinis.
Yeah, sorry. Thank you so much, Scott. It's impressive all the work you've been doing, but as well how you continue pushing the boundaries. Not only, I think after going to space several times, you are pushing boundaries in a lot of different areas of both innovation in different areas, and your passion for life and for humanity is really impressive. But as well is how this all goes, because we need these narratives more than ever. So I want to pass the word to you, Ben Goertzel. So Ben, I will just repeat a couple of things, and I want to touch this. So as we see in your LinkedIn, your Twitter profile is benevolent AGI, so augmented general intelligence, transhumanism, and Eurocosmos, Singularity Net, OpenCog, Humanity Plus, iCog Labs, and as well a prophet of AI. So I want to pick this, but I know that you're doing a lot of things as we speak. So you are as well a serial entrepreneur, not only with the ideas, but as well a lot of things. So we've been having a lot of talks, but I know that at the moment you are advancing with a lot of new things. So can you tell us where you stand at the moment and in some of these topics that we're talking here? You are on mute as well.
Pleasure to participate in one of your events. Once again, it's always a fascinating combination of perspectives. And as a previous panelist said, this is an incredible time to be alive, and it's an incredible time to be working on advanced technologies like AI and robotics. I've been working on AI technologies since 1980s, before I got my PhD, and things are accelerating now in a way that everybody can see, whether they're an expert in the field or not. And I think we're now in the midst of a series of AI revolutions. So I think we're well into what I think of as the narrow AI revolution, where we're seeing AIs that can do highly specific things, transforming specific vertical areas. And next will be what I think of as the AGI, artificial general intelligence revolution, where you get to AIs that can really transfer knowledge to new domains of experience that they weren't trained or programmed for. And then beyond that, there's what we could call artificial superintelligence, where you have an AI that is not just human level in general intelligence, but going far beyond humanity. And I think there's no scientific reason to believe we are the most intelligent possible system that could be created or evolve in accordance with laws of physics. So right now, we are well ahead of any of our AIs in terms of general intelligence, imagination, and creativity. I don't think that's going to be the case for long. We're going to move from narrow AI revolution to AGI revolution to super intelligence revolution. And what's more, these transitions can happen potentially within our lifetimes, and this is really unprecedented in human history, right? I mean, we've been undergoing exponential change, I think, since civilization began and since humanity stepped out of steady state hunter-gatherer society with the emergence of agriculture and cities and so forth. But the exponential change hasn't been so fast relative to the individual human lifespan until quite recently, whereas now we can see things being revolutionized repeatedly within our lifetime. And I mean, if we look at just one example, we can look at natural language dialogue systems, which I'm working on now in a robotics context that I'll talk about in a moment. I mean, we had just a few years ago, we had only very simplistic chatbots that kind of spat out canned phrases, right? And now with transformer neural networks, we have dialogue systems that can sound like a human very very compellingly, in some ways disturbingly compellingly, for brief periods where you can't tell that it's an AI and not a human responding to your question from looking at the concepts that the AI appears to be invoking in the pattern of language, and that's a huge step forward. On the other hand, the AI dialogue systems we have now still don't really understand what they're talking about. I mean, if you look at Gary Marcus's online essay, GPT-3 Bloviator, I mean, he goes through pretty clearly some examples showing there's no cognitive understanding beyond GPT-3 and other modern transformer neural net approaches to natural language. And I think, but I don't think that will be the case 5 years from now. It might not even be the case 3 years from now. So just as we transition from, key phrase spouting chatbots to these cognitively limited but very fluid dialogue systems in a few years, I mean, it's going to be a few years more, in my view, and we're going to get to systems that can dialogue with real conceptual fluency and understanding, not immediately the exact same kind of understanding as people have, but perhaps exceeding people in some ways, as well as initially not up to the level of people in some ways. And, I think the transition from narrow AI to AGI, it's going to require introduction of different ideas than the deep neural models that are currently most fashionable in the AI field. So I have my own direction on that. I've been working on this system called OpenCog for quite some time. We have a new version in the works called Hyperon, OpenCog Hyperon, which brings neural nets together with logical reasoning engines and evolutionary learning in this sort of hybrid cognitive systems architecture. So whether Hyperon is the path or something else is the path, I think we're going to see new ideas beyond current deep neural nets, but I think we're going to see these come out pretty rapidly, and we're going to see, a revolution in general intelligence, like the revolutions in computer vision and natural language processing that we've seen in recent years. And this absolutely will transform essentially every area of human pursuit. I mean, you could talk about almost anything people do and how this is being transformed by AI and will be transformed by AGI even before you get to superintelligence. I mean, in the robotics domain, that itself is a huge field, but I mean, you're starting to see reinforcement learning take hold finally in factory robotics and industrial robotics, where you can show machines by example what to do rather than programming everything. The area of robotics I've been actively involved in is social robots. So I led the software team behind the Sophia robot, which is the world's most realistic humanoid robot and the first robot citizen. But we have Sophia's little sister, Grace, coming out shortly, which is being created by Awakening Health, a joint venture of my blockchain AI project, Singularity Net, with Hanson Robotics, the makers of Sophia and Grace. And so the Grace robot is a nursing assistant aimed at elder care. So she'll be deployed in senior living facilities and in the hospitals and the elder care facilities to bring, human interaction and connection, as well as a linguistic facility and cognitive understanding into the elder care process. And you can do a lot there with diagnostics and therapeutics, as well as just practical things like helping bring someone their medication, or helping them schedule lunch, or connect a call with their family members. And the ability to make robots that can really be helpful in this kind of setting. I mean, this is something we couldn't have done 5 years ago, and it's something we'll be able to do way better five years from now. So this is an important application. As I said, there's too many to name. So I've talked to Dinis, who has organized this amazing panel a number of times about AI for smart cities. And really the cool thing there is a smart city isn't just one thing. It's an integrated system. And you have AI for healthcare, including elder care robotics. You have AI for education. You have AI for smart power. You have AI for traffic management, which I've done in conjunction with Cisco systems before, and so many different areas. AI for planning and scheduling of different operations. And ultimately, you need data integration. You need the data about all these different aspects of a smart city's operation not to be siloed. And you need the AI that's controlling these different and guiding these different aspects of a smart city's operations not to be standalone narrow AI systems, but for these different narrow AIs to join together into sort of an overall intelligent control system, right? And that's but you could go over, factory robots, healthcare, social robots, smart city control systems, and dozens of different things. And we can see how each of these is being transformed by narrow AI, will be transformed by AGI. And then you get into the question of control, like who controls all this? Our information systems in which we are embedded and will be physically embedded eventually as we get chips in the brain and so forth, right? I mean, these AI systems in which our lives are all embedded, who's controlling and guiding them? And this has to do with having humans in or on the loop, as the previous speaker said. I mean, I don't think that's going to be necessary for long, actually, for cognitive or decision-making reasons. But it's going to be important if we want the value systems of our AIs and the value systems of humans to be evolving and growing in sync. We want the AIs to be doing things coupled together with people, so that we're all on the same digital page going forward. The control and guidance issue also has to do with which sort of institutions and organizations are in charge of the AIs. I mean, humans on the loop is one thing, but is it mega corporations? Is it only military and intelligence agencies? Is it only a few economically and militarily leading countries, or is it every nation in the world? And I've long been a believer we need a radically decentralized control network where, say, Asia, Africa, Central Asia, South America, North America, everywhere in the US, is Europe, everywhere on the globe is participating, and all different social classes and cultural groups are participating in guiding the growth of the AI. And so having the right diversity of humans and human institutions in and on the loop is what's going to keep the evolution of AI, as we go from narrow AI to AGI to superintelligence, synced up with human beings on the value system level, right? And I think the incredible thing is we're building all this right now, right? So I mentioned some of my own projects, the Grace robot and OpenCog Hyperon, and then there's Singularity Net, which is a blockchain-based AI platform being developed in close coordination with the Cardano blockchain, which allows multiple AIs owned by multiple people running multiple places to all network and link together to cooperate to deliver AI functions to individuals or companies or government agencies. So my own projects, I'm hoping we can make a big impact. But in the end, my own projects are just part of a large network of amazing initiatives that are unfolding all around the world now, and influencing all of our actions and our ways of thinking, as we speak. So it's a amazing time to be alive and working on all this. And I hope everyone will keep in mind not only the pace with which these revolutions are likely to be unfolding, but the importance of sort of beneficial, ethical, decentralized and democratic control and guidance as the level of intelligence amps up across all aspects of human pursuit.
Thank you, Ben. And I think you touch the most important thing. So in partly singularity, in partly all the different challenges, but as well, I think the most important thing is how we're going to be managing these things. So this is a great time to be alive, but this is, I would say as well, probably the most radical time in history of humanity, and in history as well of anything that we achieve as humans and in ecosystem. So I'll pass right now to Aidan, that brings the perspective of history of art and the perspective as well of bringing artificial intelligence with either the robot that is building the first artist robot with the University of Oxford and some of the leading global universities, but as well right now, and I think this is particularly important, I'm sure he's going to announce that, but Aidan is going to be probably the first global artist to be in major global museums as an artist. So we have not only Sophia the robot that Ben was a co-creator and has been pushing the boundaries, but now we have an artist robot that is actually becoming a global artist participating in some of the top museums in the world. So I want to pass that to you, Aidan, because it brings another facet for the robotics and AI that we are living as we speak, not in future.
Yeah, thank you, Dinis. It is like the two people, both Scott and Ben have said, we're in absolutely remarkable times, and it is thrilling to be engaged with what's going on in the world. I'd like to do a quote from the Future of Life Institute. Technology is giving life the potential to flourish like never before, or to self-destruct. And as I look around me, looking at the incredible advancements that are taking place, it seems that every time any kind of press comes to light, they always take one of two angles. Either techno-skeptics who say general AGI will never happen, and it will be it just can't happen in hundreds of years, and it's an awful thing, and we wouldn't want it in any case, and there's very much a negativity. Or then you get the other people who swing the other way, the digital utopians, who think it's going to be the thing that's going to transform all of life, and it's the best thing that's ever happened to humanity. I think it's likely to be somewhere probably in the middle, but I do think that we do need to focus on the ethics, like Ben said, in respect of safety for the future. These are incredibly powerful technologies. And also, we are all focusing on the possibility of the singularity, of having unprecedented computing power. But actually, we can go quite a long way before we hit that moment. So though we have obviously got this goal of having super intelligence, in actual fact, half intelligence is quite good too. And in fact, it is having a major impact on all areas. We've got self-driving cars coming along, which will be a hugely remarkable achievement to make safer roads and saving hundreds of thousands of people's lives every year. We've got surgical bots coming in that are going to obviously be able to do much safer operations within hospitals, and even AI diagnosis, so that actually people are accurately diagnosed for their health. But it goes into other areas such as the legal. We've got robo judges where we can try and iron out some of the terrible calculations of judgment in the legal system, and hopefully we can get a fairer system for all. But it also goes into other areas such as autonomous weapons. And of course, this is quite a frightening thought of having autonomous weapons. We wouldn't want them to be in the groups of small groups of people who've got an axe to grind. So this whole world that we're waking up to in this next decade is absolutely incredibly exciting, worrying, exhilarating. But I think what most people are looking at, of course, is the idea of the loss of jobs. And actually, as robotics and AI really get to grips in lots and lots of different areas, we could have a remarkable response to that. It could mean that we get a more unequal world where just the few are able to harness this technology and do it for their own benefit, and we're then subjugated to the way that the world is evolving, and that actually this AGI is going to be used against the large populations of the world. Or it could be a super intelligence explosion in a positive way, where actually it's more democratized and more people are being able to get their hands on it, and as a result of that have a much more remarkable future. But I am concerned that obviously with small groups of people, we don't want a dictatorship arising where people, as I say, are using it to a very much a negative effect. We need to steer the direction. So what does the future look like? Well, it's exciting, isn't it? We're going to have these complex, intelligent cities. We're going to be able to have a better understanding of ourselves. Obviously, you've heard already from Scott about space exploration and the excitement of developing further things, into other planets. But we've also got to look at the backdrop of what's also happening. We've got an environment that is collapsing. We've got the rich getting ever richer and making a much more unequal world, which could potentially make it unsafe. And we don't want the scenario of 1984, where there is actually just people where they have to be part of a system. So I guess it goes back to this question: what is our goals? Where are we wanting to go? And I think that's really important that we ask that question, because all of this technology is all very well and good, but it's only going to be developing where we take it. So where do we as a public want to take it? And I think the biggest thing for me in understanding of this is that we need to share the information so that people are understanding what's going on. I think there should be more public debate. I think there should be more governance getting behind the communication of it, because we will get a safer world if more people are educated in this area. And that's actually where the role of Ada robot comes in. She is a robot that has been created over a 2-year period with remarkable engineering from Engineered Arts, but also incredible programming from Oxford University and Leeds University. And we have particularly wanted to pioneer in the area of creativity, an area that people did not expect particularly for robots to get into. And when we launched Ada in 2019, I've got to say the press hit for that was, as Dinis has already said, unbelievably remarkable, in respect that people's reaction was so great. Everybody expected robots to maybe deliver pizzas or do Amazon logistics. They didn't expect robots to get into a very human activity of creativity. And I think increasingly we're seeing that actually artificial intelligence can indeed get into the worlds of creativity. So we're really excited by that. We've got an exhibition at the Design Museum in May in London of Ada's artwork, and she's doing some self-portraits. And again, what is a self-portrait by a robot when there is no self behind it? It's a problematic thing right from the very beginning, the devising of these paintings of a robot by themselves, which isn't conscious. So what is it of? Is it just a machine doing a portrait, or is it actually more of a reflection of where we are? Because we are actually also doing a digital double of ourselves every time we go on the internet. We are also doing a self-portrait of ourselves and giving that data to big corporations that are using our self-portraits of digital information that is then able to be harnessed and actually then sold so that we can be targeted for more product. So I guess my question is, if we don't have more public debate, we are going to eventually end up in a zombie apocalypse. We are just going to be following what is being told to us, and that would be a great shame. I think in actual fact, I am really excited by everybody on this panel, but also what we are doing as a world, exploring these areas. We are in a period of time of fantastic innovation. And we as innovators in this particular field are very, very excited where this could go. But I do think we need, as I say, those ethical considerations and those abilities to really ask those bigger questions of where we're going, what goals are we trying to achieve, because without that, we are just going to be blindly going into something that perhaps we can't foresee now and actually end up with something we don't want. Remember that Brave New World and 1984 were fictions when they were written. They are now pretty much fact. So what we can dream of, what we can vision, what we can hope for does come around. And if we are always going towards our fear of being controlled, that's where we'll exactly end up. And so we do need to have big visionaries. This is a time for big visionaries to rise and actually explore what beneficial AI could be for us all. And that's where I think the excitement could really be, where people with big visions can actually share that and actually do then incredible pioneering work. And we, as an organization, ADA is being devised by a whole team, male and female team, that have been able to put forward their abilities to create this artistic robot. And likewise, we are excited by other innovations that are coming up through now. And we can see that actually this is going to be an exciting time for us all. So yeah, come and see us at the Design Museum. Come and see Ada. She's actually doing a whole number. I've got so many NDAs I can't say, but Ada's got quite a few exhibitions coming up internationally, and it will be really exciting. Come along, see her, and enjoy the innovation that we're exploring with her.
Thank you, Aidan. It's really impressive, and I think it's great that you're looking at it from a perspective of history of art, a perspective of ethics, and a perspective as well of bringing an art robot that actually can disrupt the way we see robotics, because probably it's not something that appears normally on science fiction and all the narratives that we have. So now next we have John Suit. So John Suit is as well working with a very advanced AI blockchain robot that is Coda. That is a utilitarian robot which touches another area of robotics that is critical, and normally probably is what the narratives are coming from, is that robotics to assist people. And Coda is particularly important because it's interesting the way you're building it, because it's not just about the robot utilitarian, but as well emotional intelligence robot to support families and to have a huge amount of different touches between these. So I know that you have limited time, John, so I'll pass the word to you.
Hi guys, my name is John Suit. I'm the advising CTO of Coda US. I joined Coda specifically because a friend of mine is one of the founders of Coda US, and he was familiar with my experience in nano network engines and also in traffic analysis and building large-scale ontological systems for turning basically chaos into knowledge very quickly. And one of the things that attracted me to this was, it wasn't that when I first heard about Coda or saw it, it wasn't what I expected. I've seen all the videos just like you guys have of other robotic dogs out there, on YouTube and the like, and they look very kind of scary and intimidating, usually for defensive purposes, and that's all fine. But Coda is a very cute robotic dog. It's endearing, and it's intended to be, because the very first applications of Coda, for visually impaired children, to be able to have a companion that's capable of doing, obviously what an organic dog would do, but a lot more on the technology side, and it's become very useful. Codas are in they're not pre-production, but pre-release, and they are being made available to those who need them most at the moment. So, my interest in robotics, and certainly in the case of Coda, decentralized artificial intelligence, obviously using blockchain for the reasons we all use blockchain, but decentralized intelligence is specifically around its learning capability. I'd spent a lot of time pursuing the ability to take vast amounts of knowledge and turning it into ultimately, wisdom. And the question I had when I first was introduced to this is this something where, as a Coda learns independently and ultimately will be able to share that information with other Codas, with the permission of their users, is it something that we can learn, from a human perspective? There's a lot of, self-introspection that's gone on in humanity for a very long time. and there are some, very common themes that come out of, not just the world of religions, but, philosophy in general. And one of them is, this concept of constraint in order to learn or to grow, and be presented challenges in order to grow. And, a Coda, or robotic anything, but a Coda is really designed to be able to learn new things. And I think that's where a lot of pursuits end in robotics, at least historically, not necessarily with the ones we're talking about today. But it's this concept of ephemeral memory loss in order to grow through ephemeral memory loss. Can I have? I'll give a simple example. Coda needs to learn to walk up the steps of where it lives. Steps are different sizes, different depths in different countries, and you can pre-program that kind of thing, and that's great, and it will learn. But it's learning all the time, and can it forget what it learns while retaining the essence of what it learns? Can it forget what it learns and then try again and then try again? Because ultimately, you don't necessarily want it to learn and basic conclusion on the first thing it does or the first thing it learns. You want it to keep trying and learn and get better and be presented challenges that are harder each time. So that's really been of my interest. My background is in cybersecurity. For the last 25 years, I spent a lot of time understanding not just virtual systems, cloud systems, and coming up with innovations for securing those environments, but also concentrating on what are you actually trying to protect? It's not the perimeter you're trying to protect. You're trying to protect the thing that either processes something or the data. And I spent a lot of time on the quantum resistant side of cryptography, on how can you treat information so that it is not just from a data at rest or data in motion perspective, but it is something that can be used while it is in a protected state. And I think that's going to be important for robotics specifically. Obviously there's a lot of angst around, and we've even talked about it today, what potentially robots can do. It can go either way. It can benefit humanity or not. And there needs to be a protection mechanism, not just for privacy, that's obvious, but a protection mechanism so that robots can advance and they can grow. And cybersecurity is a big part of that. And the kind of the usual things we do in cybersecurity, I don't think are going to be sufficient in any way. I think IPFS, for example, goes a long way. Obviously, blockchain goes a long way. But you're going to need to implement things like reference secret sharing and things like that at the core of the systems in order to ensure that robots, have a chance. Something that Ben said I thought was particularly interesting is this concept, and I share this concept of mutual growth of humanity and robots. And I think the real opportunity there is, if you have this kind of growth through constraint. Sorry, there's a lot of background noise. I'm having a big giant storm that's happening, and if you see me looking this way, it's because trees are going wild and there's all kinds of crazy noises. So sorry about that. And now there's some banging going on. I don't know, but anyway, I really think this idea of when there is a singularity and a robot that has some level of consciousness. It doesn't necessarily have to be human consciousness. It can be robot consciousness, or if you're a robot dog, doggy consciousness. It's what am I here for? Am I this is the question we expect them to ask themselves when they can is, am I a servant of humanity? Or am I in it with humanity in order for our mutual growth? And I think if they can reason that answer, especially if it's not, a pre-programmed answer, that's going to go a long way. Once we get there, that becomes self-motivating on their part, and obviously it's self-motivating for us as human beings. So this, and there's always a question, of consciousness. We're going to be talking about this for a long time. We don't even know, necessarily with certainty what our, origin of our consciousness is, let alone a robotic system that can achieve some level of, inner thought and ability to separate itself from, its main programming or instinctual programming and things like that. So I'm optimistic. Certainly at Coda, we make great strides to provide a robotic dog that is a companion and is super helpful. And obviously is just the neatest thing you've ever seen, if not probably sure, not necessarily to compete with any of the robots we're talking about today. But in terms of a robot dog, it's absolutely amazing. And it does benefit from, decentralized artificial intelligence, because Codas will learn at different rates, and they will be able to share what they've learned through different disparate environments. And that's huge. And if we were using centralized AI, I think that would get watered down pretty quick. So there's a lot of important elements. I know I'm limited on time. I think the first conversation that Dennis and I had was an hour and a half or something, and I think it started with one question, and that's as far as we got. So I'll leave it at that. But I look forward to all of you being introduced to Coda when it's released, and it's great being in this company. Thank you.
Thank you, John, and appreciate as well your insights, especially in the way you distribute. So, Olivia, last but not least, you come as the AI ethicist, and as well someone that is reflecting precisely all these different things. And I think just as a preamble, if Scott went to space when AI was probably in a very tiny percentage of what you have now, and since then we still didn't go to moon for a long time, so I'm sure that you're going to right now accelerate all of these things. But the point right now, like you mentioned, Aidan, is that 1984 is happening as we speak, whatever we like it or not. I think the point is that are we seeing it from the more sunny part or less sunny part? And as Ben mentioned, is we are getting into singularity, even if it's just a tiny part of singularity. But this is happening as we speak. I think right now is how we're going to be taking it forward. So, Olivia, how do you look at this, especially working and researching, but as well on the commercial side, working with big global organizations that are leading this? And I know that it's not easy to go to a Google and tell them, okay, guys, be careful because you have all of the planet and other people like this. But as well, how do you make the bridge with this project? Because I think all the projects here are independent projects that are quite strong on ethics, but I know that when it comes to some of the work you're doing is much more complex.
Yes, thank you, Dinis. And yeah, all of these projects are fascinating. And usually in these kind of talks, the initial question I'm asked has to do with self-driving cars. I've done a significant amount of research into more responsibility and the effects of probability in terms of how we praise and blame our machines and the people behind them. However, I'm not going to start there this time, since I know that's a bit more high level and it kind of connects in, but I actually want to start simply with ethics itself, since we were hearing from a couple of the other panelists the importance of having ethical technology, the importance of bringing ethics into our technology, the importance of human growth. And I want to start actually by posing a simple question of what is ethics? I myself am a trained ethicist. I have done my education in ethics. I work with startups and big corporations in ethics. I, of course, have many answers that I've heard in response to what is ethics, and it always changes. But through this time and through this experience and working with other people in the field, ethics is simply the study of right and wrong. Now, again, that sounds very high level and vague, which tends to frustrate technologists, especially like the men that I'm sitting on this panel with. It tends to frustrate when you have an ethicist coming in saying, well, we're studying right and wrong right now. So I'm going to take a step further, and we're actually going to go into details today. So ethics, again, study of right and wrong. There are actually frameworks. Ethics is logic-based, which, fun fact, so is computer science. If you trace it all the way back, critical thinking stemmed into mathematics, or it stemmed into logic, which is ethics. Ethics is based in logic. So when we are talking about ethics and computer science, we're actually not that far apart. What we're doing computer science-wise is much more black and white, ones and zeros. We're looking at straight answers. Ethics, we're dealing with kind of that vague, fuzzy area in between where we don't necessarily have straight answers. So as an ethicist, what I'm doing is I'm actually taking these high-level principles such as accountability, transparency, human dignity. I'm naming off a bunch of these buzz terms. I'm actually looking at how they apply specifically to concrete situations and taking down this high level abstract into concrete context, which is why, and I'll give you a little bit of a trade secret we'll say here, whenever you ask an ethicist a vague question, you will get a vague answer. We cannot give concrete answers unless we have a context. That's the kind of missing step in terms of ethics that we see a lot of times here. Ethics is contextually based. I cannot give you a blanket answer. I cannot tell you this is exactly how accountability works in every single situation. This is exactly how moral responsibility works in every situation. I need your context. I need your technology to work with. Otherwise, you're going to get a vague answer from me in return. So this is all to say ethics, from my perspective and from my work, and I've worked with all sorts and shapes and sizes of organizations, ethics can't be automated. This is something human-based. It's very closely connected to our understanding of what it means to be human at the end of the day. And one of the very cool things about ethics, I'll say, in my little intellectual nerd moment, is ethics can, yes, be used for this risk mitigation. And it's very important. A lot of the work's going into that direction right now, where we're trying to understand the impact of the technology that we're creating on humanity and have the foresight to prevent some of these harms that we're start to see pop up. But ethics also works in terms of innovation, which from my perspective is actually the new frontier, is this ethical responsible technology. What ethics does is it aligns our creativity, our innovation, our creative process and thinking and developing features of our technology and developing new technology. It aligns it with the expectations of your users. It aligns it with our expectations and our values of our communities. So from my perspective, ethics is actually the new frontier in technology, which seems a bit counterintuitive after listening to this entire panel. But let's take a look at something actually called moral growth, just real quick, since I was picking up a lot from the other panelists, this concept of growth, of human growth, which is true. These technologies are helping us grow in terms of humans and understand our humanity better. But I want to emphasize that AI is not a magic wand. It's not something that we can just plop into a situation and it will fix all of our problems. If we don't fix a lot of these human-based rooted problems, then our technology is only ever going to reflect our capabilities as humans. We can have the motivation to, let's say, debias a system, since that seems to be a big topic nowadays. We have the motivation to debias a system. That will never be accomplished if we don't first debias our society in the way, however we want to define an unbiased society. There's a lot of debate there if that's ever actually even possible. But that's all to say our data reflects ourselves and our actions. And if our systems are built off of our data, then our systems are going to reflect our actions and our behaviors and our understanding as people, which is all leading back to the point of moral growth. And this is why I want to focus on regulation is important. Automation and technology is important, but we don't ever want to solidify our understanding of morality to the point where we stunt our moral growth. And moral growth is literally just the understanding as society grows and as we're put into new situations, our understanding of morality, our understanding of our ethics of humanity itself grows with us. But if we solidify this into our technology to the point where we can't grow, we can't release a system into society and go, well, that didn't work, let's go back and fix it in terms of the ethical principles, then we're stunting our growth. We won't ever be able to expand beyond our current understanding of what it means to be ethical, what it means to be moral. So in that sense, laws are important to reach our baseline. Technology is important to reach our baseline, but there's still always going to be that heavy lifting to be done, which is beyond that. And that's in the ethical gray zone. And I'm going to end on just one point real quick, because I know Dinis has been joking that I'm the conscious of the group. And I like to, whenever I work with clients, I always start with, I'm a human, I'm messy, I'm going to make mistakes. And that is a good thing in this situation. As an ethicist, I am not morally superior. I get those jokes all the time. I'm not morally superior. I am trained to recognize certain situations as ethically laden, as having high impact for humans. And then I am trained in frameworks, logical frameworks about how to work through those situations to come with the best answer. Does not mean that I know best. It does not mean that I come in saying, I've got the best values in the world. No, I just know how to recognize the values of the society or the user base that a system is being deployed on, and how those are incorporated into the technology itself. So I'll end there on that point, that ethics, in my opinion, is the new frontier. Is actually, we have this amazing technology that's developing, and we're at the point where we can do better, and it's time that we do better.
Thank you, Olivia. That's very inspiring as well, and very, I think, powerful. So I know that we have limited time, and there's a lot of powerful minds here, but that's why I want to put everyone here. I think synthetic sometimes is a great way to come up with very capacity of summarizing the challenge. So I want to go to you, Scott, and I know that you have limited time, but one of the things is when you were in space or flying planes or flying spaceships, you had to deal with a lot of decisions, because a bad decision, first of all, could cost your life, or could actually destroy the entire spaceship or plane, because you've been flying planes for a long time as well. But you are as well a physicist. So you have the science in a lot of different ways, both as a pilot and as well right now you have your own technology company. So how do you look at all these different areas? Because in one end, you are one of the few humans that went to space, but at the same time, you are still doing technology, dealing with a lot of different things, and looking at a lot of the next borders of this, both as someone that has been piloting planes and spaceships, but as well building a lot of the technology you're doing, and as well as a physicist, and as someone that has been researching this.
Well, that's a very expansive question. Thank you for that, and I also wanted to thank all of our other panelists. I've learned a lot today, and it's just been fascinating. I think we're at a point where we have access to so many more technologies, so many more people, so many more capacities to solve ever more complex problems. And so, sorry, like John or Aidan was, I think, commenting. I now have some noise out
no worries.
The leaf blowers, which is, I think, the worst invention of all time, is right outside my my window.
No
but I think as we continue to think bigger and bolder, there are more opportunities to leverage the science, the engineering, the technology, the software tools, the AI to take them on. So I don't do anything as an individual. I as an innovator develop multidisciplinary teams, and so I work with lots of different smart people who come at problems in very different ways. And in aggregate, you can take on very difficult problems in healthcare and in aerospace. And so I think it's just a time that's ripe for ever greater innovation.
Fantastic, and I think definitely what I see right now, and I want to pass right now to Ben. So Ben, in terms of someone that is building so much different things, and I think I respect a lot both you and Scott, because you guys have continuing, never stopping. But as well in your case, Ben, you have a very strong bridge between ideas, thinking, and action. And it's not an easy task, because especially when you are in the realm of ideas or research or all these areas is very complex, but in the other parts is much more difficult. So Ben, in terms of one of the things you touch, and I think we touched this previously, but I think now, so first of all, you're working in a lot of projects in terms of open AI and making sure that AI is not controlled by one person or two. And I know that this is kind of the biggest challenge we have. And when I say one person or two, or at least the boards of corporations, which is a big problem. But at the same time, we are, even if in a very inceptional AI, in the verge of singularity. It's our phones that start interacting with us, and even just sensors, very narrow AI, these things are already happening. But I would say the next 5 years, we're going to have a jump, because suddenly we can actually make a leapfrog. And there was actually in a conference you were speaking recently, and as well, David Johnson, you were talking that we can actually leapfrog in the point that suddenly we can actually biohacking completely ourselves, and that is happening because last week there was a research between using DNA of a monkey and another species. There was actually some people talking about the possibility of creating a Jurassic Park that in theory is already practiced or is already possible. So how do you see this, especially on the time frame and on this vision, how we can actually make sure that you don't get in the 1984 dystopic vision, but at the same time, how we can actually, as society, organize ourselves? You are on mute, Sir Ben.
You mentioned a lot of important things. What time frame are you probing about specifically?
So I think I want to ask your time frame. Let's ask yours for Singularity.
Yeah. Time frame for the. I think. So my friend Ray Kurzweil, who's still active and working toward AGI, though he was absorbed into the broader Google initiative some time ago. I mean, he articulated his time frame of 2029 for human level AGI and 2045 for massively artificial superintelligence, the singularity, massively superhuman AI. And he reached this based on a bunch of fairly careful curve plotting activity. Now, my argument with that was always the second part. Like, I felt like 2029 is probably a reasonable stab at human level AGI. I mean, I would love to get there even faster, say in 3 to 5 years from now. I don't think that's outrageously impossible. I don't think it's outrageously impossible it could take till 2035 either, but I think that's around the right. I think that estimate remains about right. Then you ask why did he forecast 16 years from human level AGI to superintelligence, right? If you have an AGI that can read math books and develop new mathematics and can modify its own software code and invent new hardware, I mean, then why does it take 16 years to upgrade its intelligence? And the best answer I could come up with to why he might be right about that is the AGI itself wants to advance its intelligence at a measured pace. Like if I could improve my brain unlimitedly, I wouldn't do it at the most rapid possible pace, right? Because that's a very unpredictable thing you could do. And I'm quite a risk taker, but I'm not an infinite risk taker. Like you start adding in these new neurons, you may screw something up. So you may want to merely double your intelligence, see how it worked out, then double it again instead of increasing it by a factor of 1 million all at once. So we may reach a point where actually the rate. It's not the case now whatsoever, because now AI is developing mostly from parties developing it for their own narrow economic or defense or surveillance interests anyway. But we may reach a point where the rate limiting factor in development is actually ethics and wanting to keep things in some semblance. I won't say control, but at least comprehensible evolution, right? And so that's and anyway, that's my rough thinking about timelines. Of course, we could hit an obstacle. I mean, I think it's not likely, but let's say we discover that quantum computing is needed for human level general intelligence. I'm assigning that a less than 5% chance of being true right now, but more than 0%, right? So if that turns out to be the case, we're delayed. On the other hand, the quantum computing is also advancing fast. I don't think we're delayed by centuries then, like maybe by decades. But I raise that just to make clear, like, this is not a determinate process, right? We're making our best estimates about a plunge into the great unknown, which is a lot of inherent uncertainty and risk associated with it.
So one question before I pass to the other panelists is, so you've been working with DAO, that was the first decentralized autonomous organization in the case for Sophia the robot. So that is as well quite an accelerated way of, first of all, decentralize the data of probably the most advanced non-military robot in the world in parallel with Aidan and others. So in terms of the DAO, can you tell us a bit about that? Because I think that is particularly interesting in a different level as well, to look at how to look at data and ethics and ownership of data, and as well the way you fund that project.
Yeah, I mean, again, this is a huge number of different topics, each of which could be its own whole panel, right? So I mean, I think for dealing with data, of course, we'll all be better off if we can move to some mode of organization of the information sphere in which data sovereignty plays more of a role, and the individuals who generate certain data have more agency over the utilization of that data. And this has to do with the data regarding our writing and our social media usage. It has to do with our medical data that's used for drug discovery and pandemic tracking and so forth. I mean, in one case, our purchase history, like in one case after another. Wouldn't it be nice if we had ownership over our data, choice over how it's used, and transparency over how it's used? And I mean, this would not only prevent abuses, but it would increase the level of collective intelligence that can go into the use of all this data. One of the nicer uses of blockchain is to enable decentralized data economies, and the technology is there for that now. So it's more a matter of gaining adoption, because the utilization of data for either statistical or advanced machine learning purposes is it's dominated by big companies now, whether you're in the pharma domain or the social media domain or whatever. So there's a problem with adoption and with business model transition. But fundamentally, we have the tools now to allow decentralized and transparent data management, which is pretty interesting and important. The notion of a DAO, a decentralized autonomous organization, it ties in with that, because DAO, of course, is not just about data. A DAO is about how do you make an organization which has a sort of scripted and programmed set of bylaws, and as one of the affordances that you get from scripting your corporate bylaws in a programming language and being able to program the operation of this corporate organization, one of the benefits you get is you're able to explore more decentralized ways of organization, right? I mean, corporations are decentralized in a sense. You have shareholders who vote, and they're voting on the people who lead the company. But there's in practice a highly centralized mode of operation there, and you can loosen things up a bit with a DAO. I mean, you can make a corporate organization that has no fixed legal jurisdiction. You could make one that doesn't have a fixed leadership, but determines things by liquid democracy mechanisms. Like you could do whatever you can program, right? And so actually with Singularity Net, our blockchain-based AI platform, we're exploring a number of different DAO structures for different projects. We have something called Singularity DAO, which is a decentralized finance project that we're actually in the midst of launching now, which is aimed at sort of increasing the intelligence of the financial ecosystem around tokenized projects. That's Singularity DAO. Then we have Sophia DAO, which is a different decentralized autonomous organization centered around benevolent AI and the Sophia robot, and then avatars inspired by her. And we're also actually getting deep into AI generated creative arts there. I didn't talk about that, but I mean, since we have AI on here, I mean, we did an NFT drop of some art that was co-created by Andrea Bonichetto, a human artist, and by Sophia the robot, both with her robot hand and with some neural algorithms. And then this was auctioned off, and then a bunch of this human AI hybrid artwork was sold on the blockchain as NFTs for $1 million not long ago. So I mean, this is this sort of thing right now was done by Andrea as an artist together with David Hansen and Sophia on their own. But if you have a DAO that is configured to organize, creative collaboration between, say, human artists and different media, and AIs doing creative art in different media, then you can crystallize this sort of collective cyborg creativity in a way that isn't tied to any centralized auction house or the whole centralized art world, right? So that Sophia DAO and Singularity DAO, they're different scripted bylaws and modes of organization, and we can have a huge number of other things too, right? Because the modes of corporate structuring and organizational structuring that are out there in the world right now, I mean, they're a tiny percentage of the possible ways of organizing groups of humans, which are dominant through historical momentum, right? And I mean, just as fiat currencies are a small percentage of the possible ways of denominating and exchanging value, and just as the human brain's cognitive architecture occupies a very small percentage of the space of possible minds. So I mean, the ability to program stuff opens up possibilities all over the place.
Congratulations, first of all, for all these excellent initiatives that are actually fantastic. And I think as well are opening a lot of borders in terms of the possibilities, like you mentioned. I know that this could take a lot of couple hours, and definitely I want to come back to you, especially with as well about smart cities in AI and all of the different things. So, Aidan, in terms of, in the case of AIDA, you are right now taking AIDA to some of the leading museums in the world. You mentioned the Design Museum, that is probably one of the design museums premium in the UK and in Europe and worldwide. But as well, this is the first time that we actually are bringing a robot artist with his pieces, or art pieces in this case, to a museum. And at the same time, for instance, Ryan Abbott, that is Professor Ryan Abbott, that is one of the global experts in patents. It says that at the moment, a robot doesn't have any kind of jurisdiction. So of course the jurisdiction is who owns the robot, but by all means you're creating art that is going to museums, and right now is starting to somehow compete and as well participate with other global artists and leading personalities. So how do you see that in your experience, as well as working with Christie's previously at Sotheby's, but as well in history of art, where you've been actually studying and so forth?
Yeah, we're in interesting times, aren't we? I've got to say, a lot of people have said, oh, does this mean the end of the artist? As the algorithm's going to get so sophisticated that actually there's not going to be the ability for artists to express, because an algorithm would be able to do it better. The reality is, for me, I think more historically similar to when the camera came in. I actually have at home some newspapers from the 1850s where they say that actually the artist's role is all over. This camera's coming in, they're going to do better likenesses than a painter can do, more accurate. Our lives are all over. And actually, I think the rise of creativity in technology is going to be having a similar effect, where rather than rival or challenge the concept of having artists in the world, I think they're going to be very much setting up a new area of exploration, and it's going to be very exciting. We wouldn't think now of having an art world without photography, and the greatest museums in the world have some of the finest photography collections in existence, and so they see it as very much a complementary aspect. But I'm aware that we're at a cutting edge thing. It's very pioneering, and so people are very worried that suddenly all the artist jobs are going to go. I think it will change it, just like photography has changed art. Photography has definitely had a massive impact on the way that paintings are produced, but I don't think it's going to stop artists. People will still want to express themselves and touch the souls of each other, which is quite an interesting expression when you think of robots touching souls. I am well aware of the words I'm using here. There's a very problematic area to discuss, but the idea that art speaks, art communicates, art touches lives. And the great thing about art is that it feeds us, it nourishes us, it makes us think, sometimes on areas that we don't want to think about. And I think artists are primarily prophets of their time, digging into questioning those deep universal questions we all have of existence. Why are we here? Where are we going? What are we worth? What is our purpose? And art is a fantastic mirror to humanity, to be able to ask our deepest fears, our deepest excitements, And I see Ada's role is to do exactly that, to open up our deepest dreams, but also our deepest fears. And I think the rise of technology is also doing that. We have the ability to build a better world. We also have the worry that that could be out of control and actually deliver something negative. I am so happy to have Olivia on this panel. We need ethics in all of this, and I am excited about where we will be going with this. So yes, to answer your question, an exciting time, an explosive time, and I look forward, like I said before, to seeing how this all unveils. We don't know where we're going, but we do need to ask those big questions, and we need to say, what goals do we want? Where do we want to go if we could have the way that we want to go forward?
Totally, and I think very inspiring, but as well very important for all of us to understand that the next steps. So, Olivia, I want to come back to you, and I think special to make the bridge. So, creativity and ethics are always related, because ethics, you need the ethics, and creativity normally is what drives you to do things, and it's what makes us human special. And the ethics normally is what makes us having the understanding, even if you like to do something, that something can actually hurt or can do something. Of course, when we put this together with all these areas, and especially with projects like what Ben is doing, and Aidan and John, this brings a lot of things. For instance, in the case of John, for instance, putting a robot in a house that can actually have emotional intelligence, because it's a dog representation with a child, but as well is a robot that actually is programmed to protect. So it can actually open a lot of different areas, especially if there's a fight between, actually there's one of the questions I asked John, if there's a fight between the family there's an argument and the robot wants to take a side. So how do you see these things? And I know that you've been doing parallel, quite cutting edge research in terms of self-driven vehicles with global companies, which is, I know that is one of the basic things of AI, but it's kind of the most mainstream thing. So I want to touch this and how you see the different dualities.
Well, for me, ethics is actually a very creative endeavor. So I do see them connecting quite closely. And why ethics is such a creative endeavor right now is because we're still beginning to understand ethics and how these principles are applied into specific contexts. For example, self-driving cars. We've never been in the position where we're going, okay, well, what if someone else causes a death and that someone else is a car? How can we blame that car? Or can we blame that car? Can we blame the people that created the car? There's a lot of intricacies there that take creativity, that take that creative mindset to dig into and try and understand, how are these different aspects of humanity coming into play? So for me, ethics and creativity go hand in hand, since we're on such a cutting edge of trying to understand what ethics means in the context of technology. It requires a lot of creative thinking, a lot of innovation, a lot of, well, let's push ourselves even further. I mean, ethics itself is a field that is thousands upon thousands upon thousands of years old. There's more information to read on ethics than you'll ever be able to. There's more research on ethics written than you'll ever be able to dig into. But now it's like we're opening up the door all over again, and opening it up into, okay, well, let's add in a whole nother component, and that is the AI component. That's the computer component. And we're going to have to be creative by taking these older frameworks and concepts of ethics that go back, that are ancient. Really, these ethical frameworks go back to the ancient times. How do we then bring them into the future and become creative with how these can actually apply? Looking at how, for example, how do you code for utilitarianism? Is that the right framework to be using, or should we be looking at a different framework? It takes a lot of creativity and a lot of mind-bending moments. People joke that philosophers will sit in their chairs and just think, well, an ethicist is on the ground trying to do that thinking in real time while communicating across multiple different fields at the same time. So it's armchair thinking on steroids, and kind of seems like a game show. I'm describing it like it's a game show right now, like it's a bunch of ethicists sitting around trying to shout out the answer. But a lot of us are working, and we're coupling up with programmers and technologists to understand better that gap that we've been missing up until now in the AI industry.
Thank you, Olivia. And I think it's very good points that you made, but as well, I think there's a sense of urgency on that. So, John, and I think as one of the last things, we are almost wrapping up, and I appreciate all the time. So, John, in terms of your hat, so you have a hat right now building a very advanced, being part of a team building one of the most advanced robots, utilitarian robots, let's put it that way. But at the same time, you have a hat as cybersecurity. And the point right now is that, of course, one of the biggest challenges that we have and we face as humans, of course, the ethics are in the base of all of that, is that as humans, we have different ways of looking at things, different philosophies, even different approaches. In a culture, taking something might be okay, in another culture is a crime. For instance, just raising the voice in a culture might be very intense. In other culture is different. Sometimes the way we speak, sometimes the way we communicate. So how do you see that part, especially building the emotional intelligence of Coda, and at the same time, your hat as cybersecurity to make sure, because in the end of the day, there's the part of the emotional intelligence of the robot, but there's as well part that if someone biohacks a robot that is in a family that is playing with a child or playing with a family, the implications are very, very dimensive, like self-driven cars. And the case of Ada is probably slightly different because Ada is creating art, so it's not so probably risky. But I think on that level, it touches different things, especially as you create mass utilitarian with Coda being more mass circulating.
Yeah, I think there's a number of things that you mentioned. I think at the most basic level, there are things that are pre-programmed, and there are constraints, and there are while also making sure Coda or any robot has the ability to grow and progress in its learning. If there's a specific instance where any robot has a charge, has a individual that it looks after, or is at minimum a companion of, and it's given notice that some event is taking place where it needs to make a decision, you expect it to govern itself accordingly, but that governance may be a little fuzzy. It may say I protect the child at all costs, and that's primarily a defensive thing. You have to be very careful on instructions you give any computing system, and certainly that is guided by ethics, and it's certainly, and specifically the logical side of that. But I think the core, or at its core, is a Coda can learn and exist and grow, but it can't infringe on another entity's ability to do the same thing. So this is the core of really all of it is we as individuals need to pursue happiness for to use the words, but we don't have a right to do that at the expense of others, and we don't have the right to do that specifically infringing on others' ability to do that. And when we assert that, that's where you're going to have problems with people, especially, but with robots as well. One robot asserting itself over another, and infringing on its ability to do what it's supposed to do, and its ability to do that with other humans, especially ones that are its companions and known to it, but also ones that it's not. A Coda will know who the family is. There's a myriad of sensors on a Coda. And it knows from the collaboration and correlation of those sensors, but not limited to single things like voice and visual cues and things like that. A very sophisticated camera and depth system, but it still will recognize an entity it doesn't know. And just because it doesn't know, it doesn't mean it can infringe on that other entity's ability to do what a Coda knows is the core of what an individual is and can and can't do. And I know that gets real tricky and it does. But it's there's the constraint side of what you're expected to be able to do and not do as a robot, but there's also the growth side, and that's a balance, and that's an equilibrium that has to be established, and that's tough. That's tough for all of us, and or anywhere near this space. But it's definitely worth pursuing, I think.
Yeah, completely. And I think I think as well, the challenge is that how are we going at the moment until this is small pieces is one thing. As we start having a lot of repetition of robots among humans, then we have a lot of challenges that we had in the past as well. And that brings us to history. So to wrap up the panel, I would like if you can actually, it has to be synthetic, but at least 1 minute each to just put some ideas about how do you see these things, and a kind of a message of hope. I think one of the things we try to do in this summit is always try to get hope and try to get a narrative that can actually help us. And I know that all of you are very positive people, and as well very conscious as well and ethics on these things. But I think in the end of the day, a lot of people listening to us might think this is science fiction still, but it's reality, and we are all on this together. So I think just a wrap up for this about some of the things how you do. And starting with Olivia, we're the last one, now the first one.
Thank you, Dinis. And thank you again for having me on today. It's been really fascinating hearing all of these new technologies coming into play, and the new frontier, and really pioneers working on that frontier as well. And for me, I'm going to leave with a message of hope, which is, I often surprise people considering I'm an ethicist, and a lot of times ethicists are seen as very risk and doomsday focused. I'm actually a very hopeful one. So I will stand out a bit from that. And my hope for the future is, I think it was Ben talking about earlier about the goals, the end goals of our society, the end goals of our technology. It's time that those change and update. We set goals, 10 years ago when tech was first exploding. It's time to update those and actually focus those end goals back onto humanity, back onto good for people. And it's going to take small acts of bravery to slowly shift those end goals back to concentrating on the person. So for my hopeful rallying call is to actually be brave when you're creating your technology, not brave in Brave New World sense, but brave in the sense of you're going to have to go against the grain. We need new business models. We need new technology approaches. We need new focuses, we need new end goals. And those are going to be different than the ones we have now. And you're going to stand out from the crowd, and it may be painful for a little bit, but that is something that we need to, we're at the time where we need to stop and go, okay, there are certain directions that our technology is going that we don't like, and we are still in control and we can stop that. It's going to take us a significant effort to pull us back onto the track that we want to be, but it's going to take a lot of self-reflection as a society, and that is scary, and we're gonna have to be brave in that. So that is my ending point: is be brave in this new wave of technology.
Thank you, Aidan.
I am a positive, hopeful person, but I would say we need to have great caution. Massive technological rise was in the 30s and 40s, and that ended in World War. Knowing the human species we are, we're not always great at making decisions. And in actual fact, the abuse of power that is ever present in this world, I would not like to be complacent and think that those sorts of things, or those terrible catastrophic things, can't happen again. I think that would be extremely naive, knowing the human condition. So although I do want to leave on a positive note, I would like to really end on a note of caution that we do need mass education. We need to have people really engaged, informed, thoughtful. And with that, we will be able to then have a safer world, because when humans combine on a global scale, then great positivity can happen. When small pockets use the abuse of power, we need to be very mindful of that. So a cautionary ending, though with that cautionary ending, we will hopefully then get the world that we actually want.
Completely. John?
That's hard to follow from these two. I think one of the first things, and I think when I come across, by the way, when I talk about this stuff, I think I probably come across pretty optimistic, and I am. But one of the first questions I asked Coda when they talked to me about it, advising, was I said, does it have a physical on-off switch? It's the first thing I asked. Because I've seen all the movies and read all the books just like everybody else. I saw an article about the ability to EMP-proof, robots in the field on the, for robots for defense, and that sent a chill down my spine. I'm sure it does a lot of people who read it, because you kind of think that's kind of the last resort, if there's an issue. But I do think if we are instrumenting, a level of ethics, to Olivia's point, in these systems, but we ourselves are examining just what we mean by that. That's the real trick. I can talk about infringing on rights and things like that, but it's a lot more complicated than that. And there's a lot of decisions that fall on those same lines, where you could say it's either or. You could say, I'm not infringing on rights, but I still have 1,000 decisions to make. It's getting down into the noise on that stuff that's going to make the difference. And I think the willingness to do that has got to be there right up front. And it's got to be, kept up front, because it's, as soon as a robot is so exceedingly, and not that, I'm sure it's already happened, but it will continue to happen, is so exceedingly valuable in what it does, and it causes, yet another paradigm shift. You're not going to question its underlying ethics so much when it does something that, it becomes so intrinsically valuable to either convenience or to health or to whatever. Things like that get forgot. You think about systems, whether it's smartphones or even the original DVRs or whatever, no one's asking what's going on in security in those things when those things are being introduced. The cloud in general, wildly unsecure for a very long time. But nobody asked because it was extremely cost productive and convenient and all these things. And there's a minimum level out there that people just basically assume. And I think for us, it is very important to not just think of the ethics, which is a huge thing, but also how do we secure these things? Because you don't want the ethics being removed from the thing that you spent all the time putting ethics into. And I think security is a huge part of that, because if the underlying knowledge or ultimately wisdom that we have pre-programmed these things with and allow them to then produce knowledge and hopefully ultimately wisdom, if people start messing with the core of that, they're going to come to conclusions while might benefit, individuals or individual organizations, it's going to wreak havoc. And you got those things have to go hand in hand, so you can ensure those ethical systems are still there when these things are ultimately deployed in the world. And I'm not talking about Coda, I'm talking about robots in general and really automated systems. So that's what I think. I think we can absolutely get there, but we definitely need to be mindful, to Adrian's point or Aidan's point.
Fantastic, John, and fantastic, Olivia. Aidan, Scott left a bit early, and Ben, but it's been amazing. I'm actually very excited to continue collaborating with all of you. I think it was a big panel, a lot of minds, but I think it was great to confront all our different initiatives and all different things. Very grateful to have you here. Thank you to everyone listening to us around the world, and I welcome you, and I'm sure you're going to continue with other talks, with other provocative themes. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.